Raise a Series B or sell your company for 9 figures? What would you choose? Well, that's what Edrizio de la Cruz, founder of Arcus, had to choose between when presented these options. I dive deep into Edrizio's psyche and the internal team discussions that ultimately led him to choose one over the other. Edrizio knew he had a rocket ship on his hands, but was it time to cash in his chips or to let it ride? Keep watching if you want to hear this underdog-to-man-on-top story. Now, onto the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to today's show. Today we have Edrizio de la Cruz with us, founder of Arcus, sold to Mastercard, raised over 25 million. Amazing founder with an amazing story. Welcome to the show today.
Hey Jason, excited to see you again.
I know, it's great to have another chat. Last we spoke, we were talking about venture studios, and it looks like you've already made that happen. And with the Founder School, which we can talk about later. But before we get into specifics, I would love for you to just introduce yourself. What led you to launching your company?
Thanks, Jason. So I'm Dominican. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, immigrated to Harlem when I was 12 years old, and ultimately went from the Air Force, being an airplane mechanic, Wall Street business school, and then decided at the business school I wanted to tackle a problem that I had seen firsthand, which was money transfers. The process of money transfer hadn't really evolved from the time that I set foot in the US to the time I was graduating from business school at Wharton. It was the same exact process, and technology had evolved, but the process hadn't evolved. So I thought about how do we dramatically make this process faster, cheaper, better with technology? And I call that company Regali.
And so that's how things got initially started. But I always like to kind of bring up the fact that you started your career actually in the military, in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. How did that set you up? Like, did that set you up for success? That create opportunities? What was that experience like that ultimately led to this?
Yeah, I think the Air Force was fundamental in my approach towards everything that I do. I think one thing that military does very well is provide a rigor of discipline and precision in everything that you do. I think anyone that knows me knows that I'm a stickler for details, for being on time, for following processes, almost to a fault, I have to say. It's almost hard to get rid of that. But that's one of the attributes that I'm really forever thankful of my time there. It really set me up for success in a lot of other aspects of life.
Well, let's talk about how you kind of transitioned from business school to investment banker to launching Regali to what eventually became Arcus. Tell us about how that journey worked out and when you kind of started to realize that you needed to raise money.
So I came out of Wharton, decided to start the company. I really had no clue what I was doing. I think most of us, especially coming out of business school, you think you have a clue, but you learn quickly that you don't. And luckily enough, I applied to a bunch of accelerators. All of them said no, and one of them actually ultimately said yes. That was YC, of course, and very quickly transformed how I think about not only startups but myself as a leader. And I think that the quickest way YC did that for me was by giving me access to the right room, putting myself with other people who were further along than me. I remember vividly that our first group office hours there was a bunch of companies that were ahead of us, and one of those companies was DoorDash. And they were really moving very quickly. And I quickly saw that the bar was not down here, but it was way up here. And I knew that in theory. I had never seen it in practice. And it's hard to be what you can't see, but when you see it in the flesh, it's a lot easier to aspire to what the top 1% is.
That is, and I think that's why other founders have come on that come from YC have all said similar things in terms of the impact of being affiliated to these other high growth startups having that influence. Especially 2013 was a pretty solid year, to be in YC. And I gotta ask, is that sweater actually 11 years old?
Yep.
Still running strong out of the morning off. You haven't bought
Yep. I don't think they make these sweaters anymore. They just give you a random like, yeah, a random t-shirt.
Looks like you definitely wear it with pride, so they did a good job. And I love how you said, like, oh, we applied to accelerators. They all said no, but YC said yes.
Yeah. That's
The best one to
luck
get
of the
into.
draw. Yeah, luck of the draw.
But no, it's don't call it the luck of the draw. You guys probably had something pretty, solid put together. And at the time, was it just you? Was it, other co-founders? How did you guys bring together
It was four of us.
team?
It was four of us. One co-founder from my undergrad, and another co-founder from business school, and another one from Google. So the four of us walked in there, and I remember vividly, like we walked in there, a pioneer way, old office, not the new one, and you had to the left, you had like the Airbnb, box of cereal, like Obama O's, Captain McCain's, and to the right, you have like this dingy little room. And then we see like Gary Tan, Sam Altman, Alexis Heine, and Jeff Austin, Dalton. Like they were all sitting right next to each other. And and it's funny thing is, like, when I went back as a partner, they would still remember me. They still remember the interview, which is crazy because they've done like 20,000 interviews. So it was just, it's a phenomenal ride. I love that place.
No, it's great to hear. And from what I found, you ultimately raised $25 million for Arcus, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So walk us through that journey. Like you're building this product, and give people context as to what the product ultimately was, servicing the Latin market. But when did you decide that you needed to raise money, and what was that experience like coming out of YC?
Yeah, I think coming out of YC, the expectation to raise capital is pretty standard. I mean, it's everything's structured around that. So, it's a 12-week program, and everything's structured towards, putting together a demo day presentation where you can show off your growth during that 12-week time frame. Went out to demo day, didn't raise much. Then after that, really changed my pitch, and I got a second opportunity to pitch at the TechCrunch Disrupt, which back then was really a big deal. It was kind of like and I got an opportunity to pitch TechCrunch Disrupt in September 2013. Made it to the finals. That went live, stream on CNBC, and about 6 months after that, I wound up raising a total of about $3 million seed. And so which was a lot of money for back then, for a seed round. And after that, I was off the races and quickly learned that nobody wanted our product. So wound up killing that version of our product, and wound up raising in small chunks a number of rounds up until we got to our A in 2017.
So let's talk about that. This is often the untold story of fundraising because, in the press, because you change your name. You change the name of the company. So for bystanders, people that are just reading the headlines, it's like, oh, where did this company come out of nowhere and raise all this money? Like, oh, it's so easy for some people. And, that kind of, external facing lens that is not a true example of reality. So it sounded like you had multiple, pivots and iterations. Like, how did you navigate not landing, having all the expectations of YC, raise the money, not hit, with PMF and product market fit, and then kind of subsequently say, sorry, we missed that one, but give us some more money and we'll try again. What was that like?
Well, part of the great thing about YC, and I'll say this about a lot of our investors, we raised predominantly a West Coast round. So we had a lot of great folks from the West Coast, is that they expected, this is part for the course. Like, most companies don't hit it out of the gate right away. In fact, again, when I'm back to YC as a partner, I think one of the other partners showed a slide that said 90% of the companies fail. 9.9% of them succeed over the course of 7 years, and 1% succeed overnight. So if you haven't succeeded yet, you're on the right track. So that gives you a little context in terms of like what the natural path is. And I think when you understand that, you feel a little bit less anxious. So I knew and believed we were on the right path. And by every single pivot, of which there were many, there were like 4 or 5, I felt like we were just getting inching closer towards success. But yeah, it was a grind. 13 to 17 was like a number of small rounds, like a million here, a million there, putting together until in 2017, we finally got a term sheet for $10 million from a major bank. And as I indicated in my book, I'm the underdog founder, that was pulled with 3 days left to sign. I had to hop on a plane, go to a conference in Phoenix, and schmooze left and right. I was told, no, 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 no. I've got one maybe, but that one maybe was from a fund in Mexico. I flew to Mexico, and in 2017, we all know in Mexico, the biggest earthquake. It's on record happened. That was the day I was flying. I flew an emergency landing into the Mexican airport, and then my meeting got canceled, and they told me to go home, and I was like, I'm not going home. For what? Like we got we got 3 weeks of runway. Well, what am I going to go home? I will not get on a plane without a solution. So I got a week later, got to meet with the partners at that fund's office, and then by the time I got back by the time I got to the airport, they told me that they were going to do it. So I wound up raising an $8 million aid around November 2017.
So let's unpack a couple things here. So let's talk about the Mexico meeting. Was this your first time ever talking to this firm?
No. So they were part of the round already. So there was a $10 million round. It was anchored by this bank in the US, and the Mexican fund was going to be a co-lead, second biggest investor. But then the big bank kind of just did what big banks do and just decided not to do it with with zero reason why. And I told this bank, the fund in Mexico, give them context as to, why they have pulled out, why in fact we were better off without it, and in fact that we were doing very well in an upward trajectory, and this was the last opportunity they were going to have to be part of this trajectory with us, and we felt like they would add a lot of value given a lot of the work that we were doing in Mexico. And luckily enough for us, they bought into our vision and mission, and they saw it as a strength, and they came in and invested.
I always like to joke that as a founder, when you're fundraising, you're kind of like juggling a house of cards on fire, running around on a unicycle, cycling around on a unicycle, and people are throwing curveballs at you that are also lit on fire. And you're trying to now you're downplaying, I feel, the situation quite substantially. You have 3 weeks of runway. You're
yes,
coming in, puffing your chest, demonstrating a position of strength to have this conversation and, get to a successful relationship and investment. But what's that stress level like when you're in that meeting?
It was, I've never been more stressed in my life. There were a lot of stressful moments of the company. I would say that's one of the biggest ones. I remember when I got the news. It was a Thursday. It was a beautiful day in New York City, blue sky, great weather. Got the news. I almost felt like literally someone swept the rug from under me. I felt like I was in free fall. I felt so many kind of, there's a physiology to anxiety. I think as a founder, and, we always feel existential angst, right? That anxiety that something bad's going to happen. And then it happens, and then it's almost worse when you feel like, whoa, this hurts even more. So my anxiety was justified. And I went home. My wife and I shared, I just got married, by the way. I got married that August. And these news came in September. And, I was expecting to get a raise from, because I was paying myself very little. My wife and I lived in your classical 300 square foot apartment in New York City, where, you could, touch a window in a bathroom. And yeah, I got home, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My wife came in, asked me what I was doing. I was and I just broke down and cried, man. I just I cried. And then the next morning, got on a plane and just flew to Phoenix. And I just talked to everybody that would talk to me, man. And when I got like the maybe, I was like, I had to take the maybe and take a shot on myself and flew to Mexico. And I think the whole earthquake thing happening was like serendipitous. I don't know, man. It was like this is really happening. Like there's something here. And I could have easily like gotten on a plane and gone back and just folded the company. Like that's what the average normal person would do. Like, listen, man, the world's telling you something, right? Maybe this is not the career for you. Go back with your little MBA and get a job like normal people.
Your cute little MBA.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I was like, I will not get on a plane until I resolve this in some way, shape, or form. To get through the end, like you win or you die trying, right? And I was like, I'm not without a fight. I'm not going down without a fight. And I was like, I'm gonna fight to the end, and I'm glad I did because that was only one of many more massive obstacles that like little did I know that things were only going to keep getting harder. But I just knew that in that moment of time, I needed to fight.
Yeah, I love that story. And now I see why you wrote a book. You're a great storyteller. You got a great story. For those that haven't heard yet, the book is called The Underdog.
Yeah.
I love these stories because it really just kind of, like, this happens a lot. I deal with a lot of founders in their most stressful moments when it comes to orchestrating a capital raise. Like I've seen situations where, term sheets get pulled. That happened to me a couple times. Like, you just you can't count your chickens until they've had, until it's like money's in the bank. You just can't recognize something being done until it's actually there. When that gets pulled out from underneath you when you thought it was going to be there, it's just atrocious. I love that story, but I want to take one more step back in terms of the chunks that you raised, like the keeping you alive, capital raises. You kind of had your big win, the big capital raise, all that, but like, how did you convince investors to keep betting on you? Were these insiders? Did you have to go chase new money? What was kind of the insider, perspective of that raise or the subsequent raises?
I think what they call now C plus. I think back then they call it an extension or
rolling
safe or bridge rounds, which has a kind of a negative connotation. But they call it C plus now. That means we were an innovator. We're ahead of our curve. It was a mixed bag of existing and new ones. And I think, a lot of fundraising, and I tell this to the founders I work with, it's really storytelling under massive distress. And you need to come from a position of leverage, from a position of strength. You're never asking for money. I think that's the wrong framework. I think what you're doing is you are inviting people to be part of the journey. And investing is just a vehicle in doing so, right? We're partnering up together. So please come on this journey. Yeah, exactly. So I always approached it that way. And I really did believe that we were in the right trajectory. We just needed to, launch the next feature or do the next product or attack the next market. And I did believe that we were in the right trajectory. And I think that belief, that conviction really helped me raise kind of a small round to keep us going.
And this is super common. A lot of founders have to kind of go back to the well, and that's the joke. Founders are always fundraising all the time, and it seems like that was the case for you. But you get that Series A. How do you feel after that money hits the bank? It's realized, it's real, and then how do you look at your next year or so? Like how was that experience for you?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I immediately after that I entered like an immediate honeymoon phase, quite figurative and literal.
Yeah, did you go on your actual honeymoon?
Because I got to go to an actual honeymoon. I was literally signing the paperwork during my honeymoon. So your traditional founder honeymoon, and it was fantastic for I think 2018. I mean, if you read the book, I skipped from 2017 to like 2019 is because 2018 was kind of literally a honeymoon year. Like a lot of things were starting to develop. We started, building a team, really hitting the ground in Mexico, developing our product. Kind of, we had just kind of pivoted into an API for bill payments in Mexico. So we hit our stride. So it was a very good, honeymoon phase. And it was kind of really the calm before the storm that came right after. It was very much necessary. So it was a good break, I would call it.
Things started to work.
Yeah.
Quick plug for founders looking for an edge raising capital. Companies on Thunder.vc have gone on to raise over $1 billion since joining our network. It's absolutely free. Just go to join.thunder.vc to get started. And if you leave a comment on this video down below with your company's name and the problem you're trying to solve, you'll be entered to win a free coaching session with me. Okay, that's it. Just comment down below. Now let's get back to the show.
With the capital coming in and the momentum coming, can you add a little context to the audience as far as what the product did? And I think this is also when you did the brand swap, right? You launched the new brand. So just walk us through a little bit of what the product and solution was.
Yeah. So when we closed the A, we had just pivoted away from the traditional cross-border remittance play and into more bill payments via an API. What that means is basically instead of neobanks and banks in Mexico launching their own consumer bill pay interface and structure, that would just leverage us in Mexico, unlike the US, things like bill auto pay or bill payment presentation. It's just not as autonomous or asynchronous as it is in Mexico. Like typically you have to take a physical bill and go to a physical location to pay the bill. And that process doesn't really translate very well on mobile phones. So what we did is we kind of created this abstraction layer on top of all of the local billers, let it be an API, and, it was be consumed by, tiny fintech or a major bank. And that started to work because at the same time, there was this kind of massive tidal wave of venture capital coming into Latin America. Companies like Nubank, Voila, they were all, and then a lot of companies were launching wallets back then. And part of the wallet, they need to have like some basic products. And one of those products was bill payments. And guess what? Who had the access to the best bill payment API was us. It was a very unsexy product that no one really thought about, that we were just kind of niched on. So that started to work really well after we pivoted from like Regali to what became Arcus.
And I know when you sell to like a big company like Mastercard, which we'll talk about in a little bit, there's certain things you can and cannot disclose, but can you share kind of what scale you ended up reaching as a company? And
yeah, sure. So we were in 2020, we were churning along, growing, scaling. We were probably 100 plus customers, 200 plus customers, 100 plus employees. I think we got up to like 110. And then we had the metric necessary to raise a Series B. Typical A is 10 million, typical B is between 25 and 35 million. And you're giving up, 20% each round. That's the standard, right? So, we were growing and scaling, and, my wife and I moved to San Francisco to raise our Series B and early that year. And of course, the pandemic happened. And the pandemic happened. We kept raising our B. We wound up, the world kind of fell apart. So we wound up shifting to kind of a rolling close. And that's where, Citi, SoftBank, and a number of players came in. And then ultimately got an offer for a B from a major corporation, which I can't name. And then Mastercard came in and offered us an M&A deal. And we actually did not want it. We were growing very well. We're pretty dead set on Series B, but after reformatting the offer and the structure, we approved it internally by the board and decided to go the M&A route.
And just getting to play Captain Hindsight here, looking back on that decision, the desire to pursue the Series B, knowing what was coming in terms of the market collapse, a couple of years later and how it became impossible to raise money. Would you say you made the right decision, or you wish you could still be, growing Arcus?
I mean, I look like a genius in hindsight, right? But no, I think on one end, like Arcus has grown exponentially. I think kudos to Mastercard, have done a very good job at scaling Arcus. Well, keeping the brand first, which most, I mean, you know this better than I do. Most companies that get acquired don't keep their brand, so they kept the brand. Changed my logo that I created with something, but I kept the name. So that's still alive. Yeah. And it's scale like wildfire. But you're always, as a founder, you always miss operating. There's something wrong with us where we miss operating. So I do miss operating, leading, interacting with the team. I think that was probably my favorite part, like coaching people and helping them scale. I do miss those days. But for the most part, I'm very happy with the outcome. I'm happy where at Arcus, what's become. I think we feel privileged that we did sell to a great acquirer that's really taken it under its wing and scaled it to places that we couldn't get to. So I think it's one of those few cases where M&A was done correctly, right? So I'm very happy with the outcome.
No, and that's a great story. And I love hearing when that actually ends up being the case where all parties win. So it sounds like investors won, your team, employees won, and Matt, the acquirer, win. But let's kind of go into that decision to raise the B, where it sounds like you were not running an M&A process. You were running a Series B process, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And then two parties came in saying, "We'll give you cash," or we'll give you, we'll take you off the table. And when it came to, you mentioned that you wanted to, keep at it, but conversations were had. But when it came to like managing your board and like how that board meeting went, like what was going through your head? How did you look at the options, and what ultimately swayed you towards the M&A deal, which again ended up being a great option? But what was kind of the trigger for you?
Yeah, I'll provide some context, and I share a lot of the details in the book. So there was a lot of things happening at that time. Like on a personal level, I was going through a lot of turmoil. Like my wife and I, we got pregnant, and second trimester, we had a miscarriage, right? So that was an issue, and shortly after that, I got really sick with COVID. And then shortly after that, my grandmother passed away from COVID. And on top of that, had a lot of internal turmoil, which I discussed in the book. Parted ways with one of my co-founders, who was like one of my best friends. That really hit home. And my other co-founder remained with me. We were just kind of fighting like every single day. Like everything felt like a fight or became a fight ultimately. So it was just, there was a lot going on, and I actually got temporarily like fired. Right? And I went back to the board and I told them, look, that's great, but we need to raise capital, and I'm the only one that knows how to do it. Like, let me stay here and raise capital. And then in that process, we started raising the capital from SoftBank and Citi, and then this other party came on to offer Series B, and then Mastercard came on with what became like M&A offers. Like, okay, like I'm already running this process. I might as well stay here and run it through, because otherwise it's like me leaving will cause a lot of friction. So yeah, I like went through all of that and kind of went back in to the company to ultimately execute what ultimately became the M&A process.
And this is why I like to ask these questions, because like the first version was, we got these offers, we took one, it was great. And I was like, what was the real shit going on behind the scenes?
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, you know the deal, the difference between like the average podcaster and somebody that's done it, right? Like you did it. So
yeah, there's so much pain.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. There's so much. There's so many. I mean, this like in your line of work is like, when you do an M&A at a particular level, like there's so many different communities you have to manage. You have to manage your board, your co-founder, your investors, right? Your employees as well, and the acquirer and the prospective investors, right? You still have to keep communication. So there's all these
And your loved
communities you
ones,
gotta
and your family, and like your friend. Like it's
exactly.
just like why you're not available, why you can't say one
Yeah.
thing to that person, but you can tell the other person this thing. And I don't know about you guys, but we couldn't tell our employees until the deal
No,
was
we
actually
couldn't.
done. And it's very common. So all your employees like, why are we building this? This doesn't make any sense. Like, just trust me. Don't ask
Oh,
questions. I can't handle you
yeah,
right now.
no. Yeah. And it's like, and, us, we started in 2020 and we didn't, because of a lot of regulations and external approvals that we need to go through, like it wound up taking us until November up to like 2021. And quite honestly, Jason, we didn't know if we were going to sell. Like I was ready to like be fired and just get a new job. Like I didn't think it was going to happen. We're in the middle of COVID. And then we got the approval and then we were able to kind of finally announce it internally, right? Like at the last, I feel like we were announcing it and people were like, oh, when did this happen? Like this happened like a year ago, but we're just letting you know now.
Oh man, yeah. No, I feel all your pain. It's and I love having you on the show and just hearing the raw story just to educate founders, because there's so much hustle porn out there of like that helps keep us going, like don't quit, don't stop, but like it's not like the rosiest picture. You had a very successful outcome, but there was so much blood, sweat, and tears to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there. And it's just, as long as founders know what they're getting themselves into and know that that's the fight they have to fight. Because if you don't, if you weren't juggling all that at once and managing all these personalities to ultimately march it towards the finish line, it's rare that these things just fall into place. If you would have said one wrong thing to your chairman, who then accidentally said something to one of the choir, it could all like blow up. So it's like that very sensitive communication management, which I spend a
yeah,
lot of my time with founders. I'm like, okay, you can say this to this person, but don't say this to this person until we know that this person. It's just like the logistics of managing the flow of communication. But I want to switch over now to what you're doing today. It's
yep,
very relevant to our audience. Obviously, you have your book sharing your journey called The Underdog that anyone can pick up on Amazon. You also have your venture studio called the Founder School.
yep.
So if you can give the audience a little bit about why you started it and what's the offer there.
Sure. So after I sold my company to Mastercard, a year later, I wound up going back to YC. This time as a visiting partner. I spent about a year there, and I got to see firsthand how to run an accelerator from basically the ground up, from end to end. I spent from the very best, which always helps. And I found that I learned a few things, predominantly around how much, first of all, like how much everything looks the same at the beginning. It doesn't matter if you're building a SaaS company or a submarine company. Everybody has the same intrinsic problem at the very beginning. I also learned the right way of kind of coaching and communicating to young founders in order to get them from point A to point B. How to standardize a lot of like the lessons learned from other founders into very digestible, bite-sized advice. And I also learned, quite honestly, that I really enjoy sharing these lessons. Something about us founders is like once you go through the process of pain, you almost get satisfaction out of sharing advice that will reduce that pain for others. It's really weird. I think you and I could describe it, but other people probably can't. And so after I left YC, published a book, a lot of people approached me about giving them advice and being their mentor, and that kind of ultimately led to me standardizing a number of lessons learned into what became the Founder School, which is a 12-week program dedicated to helping diverse tech professionals launch tech startup in about 12 weeks. So we work with people that are mostly currently employed at their firm, typically engineers, people that want to know how to launch a company successfully, but don't know yet how. So we give them all the tools, the frameworks, and we really go, head first into everything from how to get ideas, how to talk to customers, how to launch a no-code MVP, how to get paid for it, to the point where you have a product that's ready to, get into accelerator. So we quickly hand them off to another accelerator right after we're done. Typically, tech startups or YC.
Nice. So it's kind of like I guess they call it more of an incubator. Incubator.
Yeah, it's an incubator. Yeah, exactly. We were incubator companies into top accelerators or seed funds.
No, that's a great model on getting there very early, adding that extra value. And you said it's predominantly focused on diverse founders.
Yeah, diverse technical founders. So typically engineers, data scientists, project managers, currently working at a Series A company or at Google, a lot of those, and who want to start a company but don't want to take the leap into starting a company or want to quit their jobs yet. So this provides like a safe space to ideate and experiment. And in 12 weeks, the goal is that you have a real business that's generating real revenue with customers, and then you're ready to go into an accelerator. So we've had so far we've graduated 6 companies last year. On average, those companies wound up raising about $1 million each. We had a number of successes. We had one company called Linker Financial. We just raised $3.7 million from Commerce. Another one called Chatforce, just $50 million from that capital. And we just keep running the flywheel.
No, it seems like a good model in terms of feeding it into other accelerators that you already have the relationships with, and creating that safe space. Because getting someone to leave a very comfortable salary to make the leap, especially if that's how they started their career, is with a comfortable salary with a certain amount of expenses that they are associated with that. It's hard to kind of take that hit. It's like, all right, you're making 200 something a year, K a year, and it's like about maybe 0 or 50K a year. How's that sound?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
Amen.
I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change anything that I've done as far as the ability to create and control is something beautiful about being a founder, and probably why a lot of people do what we do. So, being that you have so much experience working with founders these early stages, what have you seen, and as far as like common mistakes that you see it happen, and you just can't help but jump out of the seat and want to help someone? Like, what are those common mistakes that you see?
Yeah, I think the most common mistake I saw, especially at YC, is just taking too long to launch and getting a product in front of customers. I think a lot of founders fall victim to this whole notion of perfection and wanting to be their first product to be an extension or representation of themselves. And it's hard because we learn in school and at work that things need to be of a particular standard. That's fine. I think as a founder, you have to unlearn and unwind a lot of these kind of best practices that apply to the corporate world that don't apply at all to the startup world. Because the goal of your first product is not really to that representation of yourself. It's really an experiment. And people think that the first product is their business. It's not. It's an experiment. It's an experiment so you can go out and learn. Put yourself out there, give yourself an opportunity to learn, and ultimately you will find a way. So I've worked now with a lot of founders, enough founders to understand that is a very common issue. So in the founder school, we force people to kind of launch a very lightweight no code MVP in the first few weeks of the founder school, because otherwise they just wind up spending the whole batch just kind of regurgitating on ideas. And so that's been my number one. That's the number one thing I've seen a lot of founders have issues with.
I like that and appreciate that. I hate perfectionism.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a fun question here, and then I'm not sure what you'll say, but I always like to ask founders, what's in your fundraising experience for Arcus or for the companies that you help, The pitch deck is always something that's synonymous with fundraising. Is there anything that you did that you felt was particularly unique or that you were extra proud of when it came to building your pitch deck?
I think that's a great question. So I think there's two aspects to that. First, I'll say, yeah, YC, we follow a particular template, which I'm a big fan of, and I teach that. It's very simplistic. It's all about kind of the simple concept is every slide you have a main point, and you should bring up your strongest point up front, not at the end. If your strongest point is traction, you should bring that up. If it's your team, they should bring that up. So it's all around fitness and delivering very strong points, and whatever the point is should be on the headline, and everything else should support that main point. Because I see a lot of decks just go ramble into like random stories. I'm like, what's the point here? So that's the standard thing. I teach at the founder school as well. When we get to fundraising, which is like week 11 or 12, the aspect that I did that I think was very personal to me, and again, I think the pitch is still up there for Tech Cruz Disrupt. I think they still have it on YouTube. Is that I made it very personal, and I think that was the biggest shift from like my YC demo day, which happened in August of 2013, to my Tech Cruz Disrupt presentation, which happened in September. I made it very personal. So I brought in pictures of my tia and my abuela, my aunt, my grandmother, and I was like, "This is the reason why I'm doing this. To better spend the money," and it was right. And that shifted the entire feeling of the presentation. Like it made it much more personal. And I think that was the biggest factor behind me going from raising like zero cash to raising ultimately $3 million out of seed. That's the story I have.
I appreciate that. I always get a different story, and yeah, YC has its templates, but what did you break of that template? Of like the typical pitch deck narrative that everyone follows, like what's your unique story? And I appreciate you sharing that. So this has been a great conversation. Appreciate you sharing all your insights, your stories, and getting intimate in terms of the chaos that you went through to get to a successful outcome. What's the best way for founders that are listening to follow you, learn more about you, buy your book? What would be the best way for them to learn?
Follow me on LinkedIn. Edrizio. There's probably not that many on LinkedIn. My book, The Underdog Founder, can be found, and you can find it on Amazon. And you can learn more about the work I do with the Founder School. Just follow me on LinkedIn, and I answer most LinkedIn messages as well. So we are opening up our applications for a batch coming up in November. So
there you go. If you are an aspiring founder that loved Edrizio's story, then maybe reach out to learn more and apply now. Apply when it's open. But really appreciate you being on the show, sharing your insights. So make sure to include all the links to your book, your website, and where people can apply. Actually, what is the Founder School website?
It's phoenixfounders.com.
Got it. Phoenix Founders. That's what it is. Oh, Phoenix. Nice. I get it. Well, appreciate you joining us today, and look forward to getting this out for our audience.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Seeing you, brother.
Thank you for watching today's episode. As a reminder, I'm your host, Jason Kirby. I have built and sold multiple companies with over 135 million in transactions as either a founder, operator, or investor across multiple industries. I'm currently the managing director and founder of Thunder.vc, where we help companies and founders at all stages navigate what capital to raise and who to raise it from, and help improve companies' odds of raising capital. If you need help, reach out to us at help.under.vc. If you like today's show, please share with your friends, give us a like or a comment down below. And as a reminder, this show is published weekly. And to get notified of new episodes and our newsletter, be sure to go to our website at join.thunder.vc. And if you sign up today, I'll send you a few freebies on how to negotiate a term sheet, how to get a free list of relevant VCs, and much more. That's it. No more shameless plugs. Thank you, and see you next week.